don't have the product on Zappos, then we'll look for product on a competitor site and point you to that. I mean, this right says, okay, I have your best interest as a customer in mind.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another conversation with short, insightful discussions with CX leaders and innovators. I'm pleased today to be joined by Alex Genov, Head of Customer Experience Research at Zappos. Alex is a longtime research professional, holds a PhD in experimental social psychology, and he focuses his psychology background today and general passion for research on designing, innovating, and creating and solving important customer and business problems. He has over 10 years of experience on customer research in the software industry. And as consumers, we've likely all experienced Zappos and the DNA and how care is in the DNA of Zappos, the world famous shoe retailer with the unmistakable tagline, "We are a customer service company who also happens to sell shoes." And of course, we believe, before he even gets here, Alex is a large part of that as his role is dedicated to customer research. But today I want to explore how Zappos successfully uses psychology to better understand and retain today's customers. So the focus is going to be on using psychology to design meaningful customer experiences. Alex, great to have you here. How are you?
Thank you, Terence. It's a pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. Thanks for the great introduction.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, a lot has changed the last year and a half, almost two. How have you been staying busy?
Yeah, no, you're right. Everything, a lot of things changed. The pandemic, I mean, just the world changed, the consumers changed.
Mm.
And for Zappos, a lot of things changed. During the pandemic, a lot of in-person interactions ground to a halt and so on. Luckily for Zappos, Zappos has always been online. It was online first for the longest time, online only. Now we have
Mm.
some retail stores as well experimenting with that. But Zappos being Zappos, and with one of our core values is which is embrace and drive change. Zappos pivoted very quickly and started innovating, on different, not only on culture, which we are known for in customer service, but
Mm.
also on different business models and different just ways of doing business, supporting our vendors and so on.
Now, Alex, I love to ask this question because, of course, so much of your role, and I understand going through surveys and trying to keep a good pulse on who your customers are, what they care about. And I think I heard you describe them as really starting to understand and make them more human for Zappos to better evolve and keep up with them. But let's put yourself in the shoes of a consumer. Have you had any memorable experiences not related to Zappos as a consumer that you've been particularly happy with?
Sure. I mean, I have one really memorable experience. It doesn't have to do with retail. It has to do with technology and how technology can be super powerful, but also how we can enhance it with some humanity and some empathy. So
Mm.
this is a story where I'm a big fan of Google. So Google, for example, they have fantastic technology. I think they're really the most underrated, powerful technology out there, right? Because it works. It's powers our everyday lives. We don't really talk about it that much. So
Mm.
one of those things is Google Maps, right? I don't know if you can think back in the day when you're driving around with one of these Tom's guides or whatever, like a paper map,
Yeah, even worse, paper directions that you're
right?
trying to cross
Directions
over.
on, right? Exactly. So now we cannot imagine life without that. So one time I had to give a talk in Palm Desert, which is a few hours away here,
Mm.
and it somehow ended up being easier to drive than to take an airplane and then drive from there. So I got in the car and put in the address, filled up the tank with gas, and just you know got the Google Maps going. And they said you're on the fastest route and you're gonna get there in at 2:45 p.m.
Mm.
And it took me down the highway, 15 south, the way we usually go to. We used to live in San Diego before, so we would go to Vegas that way. So we started going this way, and then we crossed the state line, and the technology said, "Welcome to California," and it's like, oh, that's great, little
Mm.
delightful, micro moments. And then it told me now take the next exit, and it was this small road, and I that took me off the highway, and I hesitated for a second, but then I said, okay, I'm gonna trust Google. I took that road. It took me straight through the desert, through the Mojave Desert, through the
Mhm.
Joshua Tree National Preserve. It was a picturesque drive, but it was like I lost all cell coverage. There was no like gas for miles and miles, right?
Mm.
And if I had broken down, it would have been pretty sketchy experience, right? So I finally get there, and I got to the hotel, opened up Google on my browser, checked the route, and then it actually that route through the desert was only 11 minutes faster than the one that was gonna be through civilization, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's a case where it was technically as faster the fastest, right?
Mm.
But here they asked me, do you want to have a picturesque but a little risky drive, right? Versus,
Yeah.
so I think that points to it's definitely a memorable experience because I keep sharing it, but I think it also shows, I mean, first of all, it's an extremely powerful, awesome technology that can predict your arrival time within a minute, which is always amazes me, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of it assumes when it starts assuming and it's lacking this kind of human touch a little bit, and then it can
Mm.
lead to really interesting outcomes.
I've done that same drive. Is E-tail? Was that what you were at? Is that what it is
I
out
think
west in
it
Palm Beach?
was one of those, yeah. It was
Yeah.
Palm
Yeah, I
Desert.
did that same drive and I had a quarter tank of gas and I was super nervous driving
Well,
through the
it's,
desert.
I
So,
mean, right, exactly. I just imagined what it would have been like if I didn't have gas, and it was terrifying.
yeah. Um, yeah, okay, so I can definitely relate, empathize with that. So, Alex, you have a PhD in psychology. How did you become involved in the field of customer experience?
Yeah, that's a good question, Terence. I mean, looking back, I'm originally from Bulgaria. I came to the States to for college to study psychology,
Mm.
and then I went on to get my PhD. Not so much because I really wanted to get a PhD at the time, but I needed to keep my legal status as a foreign student back in the day. So I just went on to finish my PhD, my degree. But then it was a good really outcome in the long run, and in the short term it was a little unnerving because it was very hard to find professor positions, and I was headed that way for a little bit.
Mm.
But then I said, okay, I'm gonna let me look for other jobs, and this was many many years ago. I started doing online searches for jobs, including psychology and in the as a key term search term, and then usability started coming up at companies like Microsoft and Boeing. I lived in Seattle at the time.
Mm.
And I looked into that, and usability turned out to be a very practical application of psychological research, with all the measurements, the metrics, the methods. And so I started applying my knowledge in how you measure things, how you define things in terms of psychological constructs
Mm.
to the software industry, and a lot of those concepts are very theoretical. Like, what does ease of use mean? You need to define it. It's not a hardcore metric like temperature or height or weight and so on. So
Right.
you need to have some rigor in defining that, and at the same time, with experience, of course, I realized that you need to balance that academic rigor with the business needs,
Mm.
which are very different to me. At some point, I had this epiphany that those are two very different ball games, different games with different rules. Academic
Yeah.
research and research in the industry, in business. And so once you realize that, I think you then. it's much easier to start helping the business and being seen as helpful and so on um, versus academic or theoretical and so on.
Mm. Now, when I think of Zappos, because I was ordering running shoes off Zappos, what feels like decades ago, you're known as, of course, an early pioneer with this customer-centric attitude. And therefore, your NPS obviously shows it consistently over 90, right? Which is incredibly impressive. Can you speak to any achievements you've had in this and your role related to experimental social psychology and how it played a role in this sort of success?
Sure. So, Terence, first of all, I need to state that Zappos was extremely successful as a customer-centric company long before I joined.
Yeah.
So I joined, about 7 years ago. Zappos was in its 14th, 15th year,
Yep.
and Zappos' success was just based on the quote you started with. Was based on this really counterintuitive, brilliant move to focus on customer service early on.
Mm.
Because early on, they realized, people can buy shoes anywhere, and indeed, most people were buying shoes in stores, and a lot of people are buying shoes in stores now too, exclusively, right?
Yep.
So then they realized, okay, we need to make people comfortable with this new way of doing business, of shopping. And I said the way to do it is to really focus and invest in customer service. And that for the longest time, the predominant mode was customer service on the phone. And so that's what defined Zappos'
Mm.
aura, if you will. It's this amazing, unprecedented customer service, which really exemplifies not only customer centricity, but this idea of trust, which we measure customer trust as well, and we use this question that was developed by the Net Promoter uh, creator also. So Fred Reichel developed this other question, which to me measures trust really well, and it states, let's say retailers or Zappos or any other company always has my best interest as a customer in mind.
Mm.
And so when you look at the way we run our customer service, this is 100% true, right? There's no wait times, like we pick up right away. And then if you have to talk for a minute, we talk for a minute. If you have to talk for like 2 hours, we talk for 2 hours with you. We don't cut you off. We hire the best and the brightest people for customer service, really happy people that projects. They'll make you laugh, or you know what I mean. They'll talk to you
Mm.
about your life's problems if you want to do that.
Yep.
And then if we don't have the product on Zappos, then we'll look for product on a competitor site and point you to that. I mean, this
Yeah.
right says, okay, I have your best interest as a customer in mind. So that was built into the DNA of Zappos. So when I joined, one of the interesting challenges for me was to bring some of that spirit to the digital experiences. And so again, we have a great website. It's probably, in my opinion, and I'm biased, of course, better than a lot of competitor websites out there.
Mm.
It's easy to use. It looks good. But in my opinion, it really can be enhanced by bringing that spirit of customer service to
Yeah.
the digital experience, to emulate some of that. And so one of the projects, for example, you ask how I apply my social psychology and bring the focus to the customer a little bit on the digital experiences was when I joined. I realized at some point that nobody was reading customer comments from the websites and the
Mm.
digital channels. So back in the day, we were in the self-organization mode. It was one of Tony Hsieh's experiments of how we work, and we were encouraged to self-organize around work that we thought was important and was going to help the business. So my group started the voice of the customer, what is called a circle, and then it got attached to higher level circles and so on. And
Mm.
it's been a journey, but right now we got to a point where the executives read customer comments, and now the focus on the customer is um, is really much sharper. In addition to focusing on important business metrics like supply chain
Right.
things and availability of products and selection, our relationship with our vendors. So these are the pillars, right? But when it comes to the customer, now we're in this process of listening to customers more and then responding.
Mm. And so, to quote you, Alex, I know that you said customer obsession is great, but what is best is customer care. And there's obviously been a lot of talk about the need for empathy in the last 18 months and what we've been experiencing as a globe, a planet. But what do you mean by care versus obsession, and why do you stipulate the difference between the two?
Well, I mean, we are. It's a famous quote by Jeff Bezos. It's a call for like Amazon is customer obsessed, and I think
Mm.
it's a very emphatic statement, right?
Mm.
It kind of shows like passion for the customer and so on, and that's I think that's terrific. I'm not negating that. I'm saying in addition to that, right? You what Zappos is doing is this personal touch. You know what I mean? In terms of what comes through when it comes to customer service on the phone, right? When we talk to customers within our Zappos culture, the emphasis was on interpersonal relationships. So a lot of
Mm.
the culture was built around getting to know your first of all selecting the right people. So you're surrounded by nice people, right? You're not brilliant jerks are not tolerated.
Mm.
That's right. It's those people with egos that overpowers everything. They're not, you know, um, they're selected out in a way, or they self-select out.
Mm.
But and then once you have a great group of people, then the people are encouraged to not only work together but have fun together to get to know each other, and that actually to go back to your initial question, the pandemic, that's what really helped then Zappos when we moved to work from home. That those relationships sustained and helped us work really well together,
Mm.
online as we were. Of course, you cannot substitute in-person interactions and so on. But this is, I think that's one of those typical Zappos, um, hallmarks of not only focus on the customer in terms of, let's say, numbers, right? But also focus on customers as humans. And that's what, for example, me and my group, that's what we help the organization with.
Right.
Again, we work hand in hand with our colleagues who are much smarter people than me in data science and
Mm.
analytics. They crunch the numbers. We need to do that, but that provides the what's happening, and then what we help the organization with is to get some sense of why this is happening, and you need to have both views, and
Right.
that's where psychology comes in, right? To understand that sometimes you need to achieve a business goal and say, why don't we increase sales in this area? But then you understand your customers and their specific context, and they say, what's the best way of doing it, right? And what's the
Mm.
best timing and what's the best way to talk to them and so on.
Mm. So, a loaded word thrown around the past, especially since the pandemic hit, was the need to inject personalization. So I have a two-part question for you, Alex. Obviously, one, what is Zappos' definition of personalization, right? What does that mean to your company? But then, do you feel that personalization can actually be scaled, right, and scaled effectively?
Right, two very meaty questions there. So we can, how much time do we have?
Yeah.
So no, I'll try to be succinct here. So I think one of our really great exercises here was to really first realize that personalization is an important thing. Everybody's talking about it, especially in retail. If you go to these events that you've been to many of those, I'm sure. 80% of vendors are personalization, right?
Yeah.
Personalization technology, personalization this, personalization that. To me, a lot of that technology is, I mean, it's pretty awesome, but at the same time, if it's not coupled with a deep understanding of the customer, it can be a bit misguided, right? It ends up being just best guess recommendations, right? Based on data, based on averaging people. And that's one of my topics that I'm passionate about. Again, coming from psychology, is you cannot average customer experience.
Mm.
Just like if I put your head in a very hot oven and feet in a block of ice, I would say on the average you'll feel pretty comfortable, right? Comfortable
Mm.
75 degrees, right? But you can imagine the actual experience. So I think that brings to light what averaging customer experience does, right? So we said, okay, personalization is important. Are we measuring it? And we realized, okay, we're not asking our customers how they feel. So we have in voice of the customer loop that I mentioned at the beginning. We included a question: how personalized is the Zappos experience to me? Something to that effect, or tailored. And then we were luckily we added a text field underneath, like why do you say that, right? So and we reached out to our customers, and then we started getting really top marks. I mean, nines and tens, and I'm like, really, that's. I mean, we have a great website. In my mind, in the way I thought of personalization, I didn't think we were doing a lot to personalize, right?
Mm.
And then when we read the comments, people talked about great customer service, great selection, and to me, it sounded like almost like an aura effect, right? That people are just happy with Zappos, so they're gonna rate, say, oh yeah, that it's personalized to me. Maybe because they can find the sizes that they're looking for and so on. So then we followed this up with an in-depth survey where we asked people about what they consider personalization and so on. And so out of that, this was extremely insightful. What we found was that about half of respondents, they didn't want personalization. They wanted to be anonymous.
Mm.
They wanted a great selection and great tools, so leave me alone. Don't, let me look. And then another half, almost, they said, you have my data. Yeah, just, use it to help me. The way I interpret that, again, going back to the psychology of the consumer, is to me that the common denominator, the root cause is trust, consumer trust. And again, I talked about measuring that. We measured that within the general population of US consumers on a quarterly basis.
Mm.
And it's really not great. I mean, and that's probably due to a variety of factors, but a lot of data breaches happen, a lot of things happen. So some consumers, at least, they don't want their data saved. They don't want
Mm.
their information saved, right? So when you think of personalization, again, don't assume. So I would say personalization should start at that level of permission. Like,
Right.
Terence, do you want to use your data to get you better results when you search, for example, right?
Mm.
Or to get you. So, and then if you say yes, then okay, then everything flows. So that's, I think, answers the first part to your question. And then can it be scaled? I think it can be scaled. I think we have all the data. It just when you build the trust, I think that the earning the trust is the first step. Like if you don't, you know what I mean? So if let's say I want to personalize some experiences for you,
Right.
I need to get to know you. Like if you go to a financial advisor, right, and you say I want to do X, Y, Z, they're gonna start asking you questions that are extremely personal, right?
Mm.
And only if you open up and you tell the financial advisor everything. I mean, it has to do with family, health. I mean, you name it, like the most personal, intimate details, right? You have to divulge. If you're not ready to do that, they can't help you, right?
Right.
So I think it's the same way. Like trust has to be built, and then it can be scaled because it's not rocket science, right? It's like, for example, if you go and let's say buy a backyard grill online, guess what are you gonna see next after you buy one? You're gonna see 10 more. Say, Terence, why don't you buy 10 more? Here's similar ones, or other customers also bought these grills, and you're like, why the hell do I care what other customers bought,
Mm.
right? But instead, if I ask you a few other questions, like, and it can be scaled, like, what happened? Why are you buying a new grill? Check boxes. I bought a new house. I'm renovating my backyard. Da, 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 right? And based on that information, then okay, maybe you need other things, right? Maybe
Right.
you like to entertain, and maybe you live in Minnesota and you need a heater for the winter, blah blah blah.
Mm.
That feels much more personalized, right? Versus
Right.
just buy more of the same.
Getting 7 or 8 grills. Right.
Unless you
Absolutely.
are a collector of grills, and I mean
Yeah.
for the small percentage of really collectors of backyard grills, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
That might work. Right. Yeah. So, Alex, your customer service success, I know, has been driven with some high level technologies, but what is your vision of AI, right? A big, big word the past year and a half. And what do you think are the most promising applications in the CX world?
In terms with sometimes when I talk about focusing on consumers and psychology and so on, it may feel like you know I don't want to sound like I'm putting down AI. AI is an extremely important
Mm.
part of life now. I mean, it's without AI, we cannot live our lives the way we do. That's why I started with the Google question. I cannot imagine life without the Google technology. That's AI. That's based on a ton of data, billions and I don't know trillions of even more data points that they're crunching, sophisticated algorithms, all of that. Um, Another really important piece of AI that we use for our voice of the customer program is text analytics, right?
Mm.
Imagine, I mean, this is one of my favorite examples when I say, okay, we cannot do it without AI. Because if you have read 10 customer comments and try to classify each comment into different dimensions and different valence and root causes, and now multiply that by 10,000 or 100,000. Like it's
Mm.
humanly impossible. Like you cannot do it. One person cannot do it. But there's powerful AI that does that. So there's really great applications. To me, it's just a matter of balance. That's what it is, right? You
Mm.
cannot if you start with just extremely smart people writing awesome technology and then say, well, how can we now use it, right? that that is like off balance. On the other hand, if you just say we only need psychologists that and that put people on couches and talk to them for hours, right, with a paper pad and then get these brilliant insights about them, that's not going to
Mm.
work. So where's the balance? And I think things can be scaled and empathy can be emulated by technology in an authentic way. It's not really. I think it's doable. It's just people haven't really tried focusing on it.
Right. So let's get to the actual communication channels and engaging with consumers. Um, these communication channels, I'm talking chat, video, SMS, everything has been pretty widely adopted by a good majority of generations. But what are your tips in general for making the best use of these channels when building out your customer relations? You mentioned text analytics and extrapolating insights and things like that.
So that's on the back end of if you want to really understand what's going on, root causes, right? If somebody complains, you want to understand what's going on.
Mm.
That can be, I mean, that can also be part of even those chat solutions, right? When I think it's on a very rudimentary level, it is, but it's just very basic matching of certain words with other hard coded things, and that's where it starts. The AI starts to fall apart and look, and then you get memories of Clippy,
Yes.
So anyway, so nowadays there's a lot more sophisticated Clippies out there. It doesn't look like Clippy, but it
Mm.
feels like Clippy. So it's I think I would go again back to my point about if you want to create customer memorable, customer products and services and trigger great experiences in customers and create loyalty, you need to really start with the customer need in mind. Of course, that always has to be balanced with the business priorities. That's businesses need to think about the bottom line and so on. That's without doubt. But I think you can achieve that and also focus on the customer. And you cannot start with the technology. If you start with the technology, you're gonna end up with those, with Clippy.
Mm.
But if you say, here's the customer need and what they need to accomplish, and here's their mental models and what they're used to, then you say that's the what. Then you have the how, and they have a long list of technologies and hows.
Mm.
So you say somebody's, in general, younger people like to try new technology, or more adventurous people, open-minded people, versus other people are more conservative. They stick to what they know. You know what I mean? So that then you start matching the technology with the consumer, and even for the Zappos, famous customer service. Again, there's different types of people. Some people like to talk, some people don't want to talk. They say, "Don't give me this little chit chat. I'm in a hurry. Skip the chit chat." And then you have to adapt to them and say, "Okay, I'll maybe put me on hold. That's fine." And other people say, "Don't put me on hold. I want to talk to you a while." So
Mm.
that again is when it comes to phone. But then you understand some people want to use text. Why? Because they don't want to be committed to a phone conversation. They can multitask, but again, that's the why. And then when you understand why people need certain solutions, then you can offer them, match it with the wide host of.
Mm.
Um, the same thing with video. You may think, okay, like a video conversation during customer service would be great, like we're doing right now. But in reality, that's really it's really not the best idea,
Mm.
because somebody may be a great customer service rep. They don't want to be looking at another
Mm.
person, or they can maybe distracted because they're multitasking. They're looking here, looking there, and on the phone it comes off very naturally. But on video would be completely awkward, right? So
Right.
so I think that's my biggest advice is do not start with the technology.
So I think you were being modest before, Alex, right? You've helped build out this customer experience empire that is Zappos, being there for 7 years with your psychology background. But being Zappos, right? What's around the bend? What are you guys focused on next? Obviously, in specific for your CX research side of things. For someone who's already got an NPS at 90 and more, what is the next obstacle you guys are keeping your eye on?
So again, Terence, I can take no credit in
I know I keep
building the
pushing it on you
perfect
anyway.
plan. No, this is I'm just making small contributions there. But I would say again, knowing how the world is changing, and the pandemic changed a lot, and how the consumers are changing, you need to start there. And then just focusing on the customer. I think if you stay the course, like for example, I told you about a lot of the business model innovations that Zappos are doing,
Hmm.
help vendors and to help customers during the pandemic, that everything got upended. So, for example, in addition to wholesale, Zappos is also now doing drop ship and direct fulfillment and consignment and all these other business models. Then again, on the customer front, because our employees are empowered to listen to the customer and to come up with different solutions. For example, one employee during a conversation with the customer thought of the idea to sell single shoes, thinking of all the people with special needs out there, and
Hmm.
there's millions of them. So now Zappos is selling single shoes. You can buy one shoe, right, or mix and match, and that's another example of this innovation. Again, during the pandemic, because of the power of customer service and how well we are set up for that, Zappos started a little program said customer service for anything or something like that. So if you, for example, are a small business owner and you need some kind of special equipment, I don't know, for landscaping, you can call Zappos and they can do the research for you.
Hmm.
Because you know what I mean. That again part of this the Zappos DNA of we can help
Yeah.
you with anything in a way, right? I mean, it sounds kind of far fetched, but it's really that's what made Zappos Zappos. So I think it's focusing on the customers, focusing on commerce and helping our vendors and taking this holistic view customers, commerce, community, and culture. These are the four pillars of Zappos.
Well, wonderful, Alex. I don't want to keep you any longer. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here. Do you have any closing words of wisdom?
No, I think we covered everything, Terence.
Yeah. Again, Alex, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And this was, again, Alex Genov, Head of Customer Research at Zappos, for today's focus, using psychology to design meaningful customer experiences. Alex, thank you again. The pleasure was all ours, and best of luck for the rest of 2021.
Thank you, Terence. You too.